The easiest decisions are often the ones that cost us the rest of our lives. The judge asked one final question. Mr. Brooks, do you understand the terms of this divorce agreement? Ido. And you wish to proceed? Yes. My signature came easily. One smooth stroke of black ink across the bottom of the page. Years of marriage ended in less than 3 seconds. My attorney slid the papers across the polished oak table with quiet satisfaction. It's done. I nodded. So it is. Across the courtroom, Hannah Mitchell never looked at me. She simply picked up her copy of the documents, thanked the judge with remarkable politeness, and stood. She wore the same cream-colored coat she had worn on our first anniversary. The same delicate silver necklace I had once given her after surviving my first year as head of the Brooks family. Back then she had smiled every time she touched it. Today, she didn't touch it once. Outside the courthouse, Manhattan buzzed with its usual chaos. Reporters waited behind metal barriers. Camera shutters echoed like distant rain. Black SUVs lined the curb. Marco opened the rear passenger door for me. The board is waiting. I glanced toward the courthouse entrance one last time. Hannah stepped outside carrying a small wooden box pressed gently against her chest. No designer lagi. No expensive jewelry. No security detail. Just one old wooden box no larger than a shoebox. I almost laughed. After everything, that was all she wanted. She walked past the photographers without saying a word. No tears. No accusations. No dramaticudie. She disappeared into the crowd before I climbed into my SUV. Marco noticed me watching. You want us to keep an eye on her? No. The answer came too quickly. She made her choice. He didn't respond. The convoy pulled away. From the back seat, I watched the courthouse disappear behind rows of steel and glass. I expected relief, freedom, victory, and said, there was only silence. By evening, I was back inside the penthouse overlooking Central Park. Everything remained exactly where it had been that morning. The marble floors gleamed. The artwork hung perfectly straight. The city sparkled beneath the winter sky. Nothing had changed. Except, there were no fresh flowers in the dining room. Hannah replaced them every Monday. I hadn't realized today was Monday. Maria, our longtime housekeeper, quietly approached. Would you like dinner, sir? Whatever's ready. She hesitated. Mrs. Mitchell always planned the weekly menus. The words landed unexpectedly. I'll manage. Of course. She disappeared into the kitchen. I loosened my tie and wandered through the apartment. The piano remained closed. A novel rested face down on the living room sofa. Her reading glasses still sat beside it. She had left almost everything behind, as though she had never cared about possessions at all. Only later did I notice something missing. The small wooden music box that had belonged to her mother. It had always rested beside the fireplace. Now, only the faint outline remained where years of dust had protected the polished wood beneath it. I frowned. So that was what she had carried from the courthouse. Not legal files. Not money. Just memories. I poured myself a glass of whiskey. The amber liquid tasted strangely bitter. Near midnight my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I answered without much thought. Mr. Brooks. Speaking. My name is Daniel Foster. The voice sounded calm. I'm the attorney handling a private instruction left by your former wife. Former wife. The words felt unfamiliar. What instruction? There is a sealed package addressed to you. I looked toward the empty piano. When? It can only be delivered. He paused. 30 days after today's divorce. I frowned. Why wait? I'm afraid I cannot answer that. What does it contain? I'm under strict legal obligation not to disclose its contents. Silence settled between us. Before ending the call, the attorney quietly added one sentence. I sincerely hope that when you finally receive it, it won't already be too late. The line disconnected. For several long moments I remained perfectly still, the untouched glass of whiskey resting in my hand. Across the silent apartment, the empty space beside the fireplace suddenly felt much larger than the room itself. For the first time that day, I found myself wondering what Hannah had chosen to leave behind, and what she had quietly taken away forever. The quietest houses are often the ones filled with the loudest regrets. The morning after the divorce, I woke before sunrise. For years, Hannah had been the first person awake. She always opened the curtains before making coffee. She claimed the city looked kinder in the first light of day. I used to tease her for saying that. This morning, the curtains remained closed. The apartment stayed dark. And there was no smell of coffee drifting through the halls. I stood there longer than I wanted to admit. Then I opened the curtains myself. The skyline hadn't changed. Only the person standing in front of it had. Maria greeted me in the kitchen with a hesitant smile. "Good morning, Mr. Brooks." "Morning." She reached automatically for a second coffee cup. Halfway through the movement, she stopped. "I'm sorry." I looked at the empty space beside mine. "It's fine." Neither of us believed it. My phone buzzed constantly. Board meetings, investment reports, security updates. The empire hadn't slowed down simply because my marriage had ended. By 9 o'clock, I was seated at the head of the conference table. Executives discussed expansion. Lawyers reviewed contracts. Everyone waited for my opinion. Normally, I dominated every meeting. Today, I found myself staring at a notebook lying in front of me. Its leather cover looked strangely familiar. Marco noticed first. "Boss." I blinked. "What?" "The proposal." "What about it?" "We've been waiting." The room fell silent. I hadn't heard a single word anyone had said during the last 15 minutes. "We'll review it tomorrow." Nobody argued. They simply gathered their papers and quietly left. Marco stayed behind. "You're distracted." "I'm tired." "No." He studied me carefully. "You're alone." I almost laughed. "I've been alone my entire life." "You weren't yesterday." His words followed me long after he left the room. That evening, I returned to the penthouse earlier than usual. Habit made me expect music. Every Thursday, Hannah practiced the piano after dinner. Soft melodies usually drifted through the apartment. Until midnight. Tonight, only silence welcomed me. I walked into the living room. The piano remained exactly where it had always been. Closed. Still. Untouched. On top rested a folded sheet of music. Moonlight Sonata. Her favorite. She had left it behind. Without thinking, I lifted the cover and pressed one key. The single note echoed through the empty apartment before disappearing into the silence. It sounded lonely. I closed the piano immediately. The sound hurt more than I expected. Later that night, I wandered into the walk-in closet. Most of Hannah's clothes were gone, but not all. One cream-colored sweater still hung neatly beside the door. She had forgotten it. Or, she had chosen to leave it. I reached out instinctively. The fabric still carried the faint scent of lavender. I quickly stepped back. This was ridiculous. I had signed those papers willingly. I had convinced myself divorce was the logical solution. So why did every ordinary object suddenly feel impossible to ignore? Near midnight, Maria knocked softly on my office door. I found this while cleaning. She handed me a small envelope. My name was written across the front in Hannah's handwriting. I thought she'd taken everything. So did I. After Maria left, I turned the envelope over several times. It wasn't sealed. Inside rested only a single folded page. Not a letter. A grocery list. Milk, fresh flowers, coffee beans, lemons, and at the bottom, written almost as an afterthought, remember to remind Nathan about his heart medication. He always forgets when he's stressed. I stared at those words for a very long time. Even after signing the divorce papers, she had still been thinking about me. Not herself. Me. A strange weight settled in my chest. For the first time since the courthouse, victory no longer felt like victory. Just before I could put the paper away, my phone rang again. Daniel Foster. The attorney. I apologize for calling twice. What is it? I've just been informed. He hesitated. That your former wife declined to leave a forwarding address. So if you intend to speak with her before the 30-day instruction becomes effective. His voice grew quieter. You may already be running out of time. Sometimes the person who disappears isn't running away from you. They're trying to make sure you'll survive without them. 3 days passed. then 7. I told myself I wasn't counting. I was lying. Every morning, I found another reminder of Hannah hidden somewhere inside the penthouse. A bookmark tucked inside a novel. A handwritten recipe folded into a kitchen drawer. A pressed white rose between the pages of an old photo album. She had quietly left pieces of herself everywhere. It felt as though the apartment refused to let her disappear. I buried myself in work. Meetings started before sunrise. Negotiations stretched past midnight. Numbers. Contracts. Investments. The language I had trusted my entire life. Yet every signature reminded me of the one I wished I could erase. One afternoon, Marco entered my office carrying a thin folder. I asked you not to investigate her. I didn't. He placed the folder on my desk. This came from Daniel Foster. I slowly opened it. Inside was only one document. A change of address request. Most of the information had been legally withheld. Only one detail remained visible. State Colorado. Colorado. Not Europe. Not California. Not another country. A quiet mountain state nearly 2,000 miles away. I frowned. Hannah hates cold weather. Marco Nadid. I remember. Then why Colorado? Neither of us had an answer. Before I could think further, my phone vibrated. Daniel Foster again. Mr. Brooks. You seem to enjoy calling me. I wish the circumstances were different. What happened? There has been another instruction. I stood and walked toward the windows overlooking Central Park. I'm listening. If Mrs. Mitchell cannot be located after 30 days. My chest tightened. The sealed package will still be delivered. I looked down at the traffic below. What do you mean if she cannot be located? A long silence followed. Finally, I was instructed to prepare for that possibility. The words settled over me like ice. Is she in danger? I genuinely don't know. But she expected the possibility that someone might not find her. The call ended. For the first time in years, I felt afraid. Not of rivals. Not of betrayal. Not of losing money. Afraid of losing time. That evening I drove alone. No security convoy. No flashing headlights. Just me. The city looked different without somewhere to rush. Without realizing it, I stopped outside a small bookstore on the Upper West Side. Hannah loved this place. The owner looked up immediately. Mr. Brooks. You remember me. Your wife came every Saturday. The correction almost slipped from my mouth. Former wife. Instead I simply nodded. Has she been here? The elderly woman smiled sadly. Not since last week. Did she say where she was going? No. She disappeared into the back room. When she returned, she carried a carefully wrapped package. She asked me to give you this. If you ever came looking. My heartbeat quickened. I carefully unwrapped the brown paper. Inside rested a brand new hardcover novel. The first page contained only one sentence written in Hannah's handwriting. Some stories only make sense after you've reached the ending. Nothing else. No address. No explanation. Just that. As I closed the book, something small slipped onto the wooden floor. A train ticket. New York. Denver. Departure date. The morning after our divorce. I stared at it. She had planned this long before we signed those papers. The realization hurt more than I expected. She hadn't left because of the divorce. She had already decided to disappear. When I returned to the penthouse, Maria was waiting anxiously. Mr. Brooks. What is it? A young woman stopped by while you were gone. Who? I don't know. Did she leave a name? Maria slowly shook her head. No. But she left this. She handed me a small white envelope. No postage. No return address. Inside was a single medical appointment card. Rocky Mountain Oncology Center. Patient, Hannah Mitchell. The appointment date was scheduled exactly 1 week before our divorce. My vision blurred. Every argument. Every cold conversation. Every silent dinner. She had already known something. And she had faced it completely alone. The cruelest truths are never hidden in lies. They're hidden inside the moments we never bothered to notice. I couldn't sleep. The oncology appointment card lay on my desk beneath a pool of warm lamplight. I had read it at least 50 times. Rocky Mountain Oncology Center. 1 week before the divorce. 1 week before I smiled while signing away the woman who had spent years protecting my peace. I poured another cup of coffee. It had long since replaced whiskey. Alcohol dulled the mind. I needed mine sharper than ever. By sunrise I had made a decision. Clear my schedule. Marco looked up from his tablet. For today. For as long as it takes. He raised an eyebrow. The board won't like that. They'll survive. And if they don't? I slipped the appointment card into my jacket pocket. They'll learn the company isn't the only thing worth saving. For the first time in years, Marco smiled. I'll arrange the jet. No. He blinked. We're driving. To Colorado? Yes. 28 hours later, the Manhattan skyline had disappeared behind endless highways and snow-covered mountains. Neither of us spoke much. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt heavy, as if every mile carried another memory I had ignored. By the time we reached Denver, dusk had settled across the city. The Rocky Mountain Oncology Center stood quietly beneath a pale winter sky. Modern. Peaceful. Nothing like the hospitals I imagined. Inside, the receptionist greeted us politely. I'm sorry, sir. I need to know if Hannah Mitchell is here. I'm afraid I can't discuss patient information. I placed my business card on the counter. She pushed it back without looking. Privacy laws apply to everyone. For reasons I couldn't explain. I respected her for that. As we turned to leave, an elderly nurse stepped out of the hallway. Her eyes lingered on me. You must be Nathan. My heartbeat stopped. You know who I am? Hannah showed me your photograph. Hope rushed through me. Where is she? The nurse hesitated. I can't tell you. Please. It isn't my decision. I stepped closer. Is she alive? The woman smiled gently. Yes. My knees nearly gave way. The word echoed through my mind. Alive. She was alive. Can you tell her I'm here? The nurse's expression softened. I already did. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. 20. Finally she returned alone. I'm sorry. She doesn't want to see me. The nurse slowly nodded. She said. Her voice almost broke. That you've already suffered enough confusion. I frowned. What does that mean? Instead of answering, she handed me a sealed envelope. She left this in case you ever came. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside rested a single folded photograph. Hannah, smiling, standing beside a snow-covered lake. The picture had been taken recently. On the back, written in her familiar handwriting, were only 2 sentences. I'm still smiling. Please don't remember me as someone you needed to rescue. I closed my eyes. She still thought she was protecting me. Even now. Even after everything. Marco quietly placed a hand on my shoulder. We should go. I didn't move. Not until the nurse spoke once more. Mr. Brooks. I looked up. There is one thing Hannah asked me to tell you if you refuse to leave. What is it? The nurse drew a slow breath. She said, if you finally came looking, it means she was wrong about one thing. What one thing? She believed you signed those papers because you'd stopped loving her. The word struck harder than any bullet ever could. Because the truth was even worse. I hadn't stopped loving Hannah. Somewhere along the way, I had simply convinced myself that love could wait until tomorrow. As Marco and I walked back into the frozen Colorado evening, snow began falling in complete silence. Just before I opened the car door, my phone vibrated. Daniel Foster. I answered immediately. Mr. Brooks. What is it? The 30-day holding period has officially ended. I stared at the envelope still resting in my hand. The sealed package. Daniel paused. Has just arrived. And after reading it, his voice grew unusually solemn. I believe you're going to discover that the divorce was never the secret Hannah was trying to protect. The truth doesn't always arrive with tears. Sometimes it arrives inside an ordinary envelope that quietly changes every memory you've ever trusted. I didn't open the package immediately. I couldn't. For 30 days it had existed somewhere beyond my reach. Now it rested on the conference table inside my private office. Simple. Unremarkable. Wrapped in thick brown paper. Daniel Foster sat across from me in complete silence. He hadn't rushed me. He hadn't spoken since placing it on the table. Finally, I looked at him. She planned all of this? He nodded. Every instruction. Even the delay? Especially the delay. Why? Daniel folded his hands together. Mrs. Mitchell believed you wouldn't truly read her words until you had lived with your decision. Those words settled heavily inside the room. He was right. 30 days ago, I would have dismissed anything inside that package. Today, I was afraid to open it. With slow hands, I untied the string. Inside lay 3 items. A handwritten letter, a leather journal, and a thin medical folder. Nothing more. Nothing expensive. Nothing dramatic. Only pieces of Hannah's life. I unfolded the letter first. Nathan, if you're reading this, then 30 days have passed. That means you honored the only request I ever made after our divorce. Thank you. I don't blame you anymore. Maybe I never truly did. Some people stop talking because they've stopped caring. I stopped talking because I knew there were conversations neither of us was ready to survive. I paused. My vision blurred. Daniel quietly slid a glass of water toward me. I continued reading. Please don't waste your time wondering when I stopped loving you. I never did. Even on the day we signed those papers. I loved you enough to let you hate me. My hands began to shake. I carefully placed the letter aside before opening the leather journal. The first pages were ordinary. Daily thoughts. Books she wanted to read. Recipes she wanted to try. Small sketches of flowers. Then the entries changed. 3 months before our divorce. Today the doctor confirmed the diagnosis. I smiled so Nathan wouldn't notice my hands shaking. He looked exhausted after another 16-hour meeting. He needs peace, not more fear. Another page. 2 months before the divorce. Nathan forgot his heart medication again. I left reminders in 3 different places. He'll probably think Maria did it. I laughed softly, then immediately hated myself for it. She had been taking care of me, while quietly falling apart herself. Another entry. 6 weeks before the divorce. I asked the attorney to prepare the papers. Nathan deserves the chance to choose freedom before guilt chooses it for him. The word struck harder than anything else. She hadn't wanted the divorce because she stopped loving me. She had wanted it because she believed she was protecting my future. My chest tightened. I reached for the medical folder. Daniel spoke for the first time. You may want to prepare yourself. I slowly opened it. Lab reports. Consultation notes. Treatment plans. Everything confirmed the same devastating diagnosis. Then one final page caught my attention. Patient progress update. The newest report. Date. 3 days ago. I scanned the paragraph once. Then again. I looked up sharply. This says. Daniel nodded. Go on. It says the treatment is working. It is. I could barely breathe. She's getting better? Against every expectation. Hope rushed through me so suddenly it almost hurt. Then why didn't she tell me? Daniel smiled sadly. Read the final page. I turned to the back of the folder. Another handwritten note rested inside. Nathan, if you're reading this, then maybe life gave me more time than the doctors expected. If it didn't, please promise me one thing. Don't become the man who measures love by how long someone stayed. Measure it by how deeply they changed your heart. I closed my eyes. Everything inside me broke. And somehow, everything began healing at the same time. Before I could speak, Daniel quietly reached into his briefcase one final time. I almost forgot. He placed a small hotel keycard on the table. Hannah asked me to give you this only if you finished reading every page. I stared at it. The Aspen Ridge Inn. Daniel nodded. Room 214. I looked at him. Is she there? A gentle smile appeared across his face. For the first time in 30 days. That's a question only Hannah is allowed to answer herself. A second chance is never waiting behind a door. It's waiting inside the person who finally learns how to knock. The hotel keycard remained in my hand the entire drive.
Aspen Ridge Inn.
Room 214. Such ordinary words. Yet they carried more weight than every contract I had signed in my lifetime. Marco glanced toward me as the mountains rolled past the windshield. You want me to come inside? I shook my head. No. You sure? If she opens that door, she deserves to see only me. He nodded once. I'll wait outside. The aspen ridge and stood quietly beside a frozen lake. No luxury. No grand entrance. Just warm lights glowing behind wooden windows. The kind of place Hannah would have loved. Simple. Peaceful. Untouched by the noise of my world. Inside, the receptionist smiled politely. May I help you? I placed the keycard on the counter. I was told to come here. She looked at the card. Recognition flickered across her face. One moment. She disappeared into the back office. Every second stretched endlessly. When she returned, she offered me a gentle smile. Room 214 is upstairs. Is she expecting me? I believe. She hesitated. She's been expecting you for much longer than today. The hallway felt impossibly quiet. My footsteps echoed across the old wooden floor. Room 214. I stood outside the door. For the first time in years, I didn't know what to do. I had negotiated billion-dollar agreements without hesitation, faced armed rivals without fear. Yet one wooden door left me completely helpless. I raised my hand, then lowered it again. What if she didn't want to see me? What if I had already arrived too late? Before I could decide, the door slowly opened. Hannah stood there. For a moment, neither of us moved. Her hair had grown slightly longer. She looked thinner. The illness had left faint traces beneath her eyes. But her smile, it was exactly the same. The same smile that had once convinced me the world could still be gentle. Nafan. Her voice remained soft, almost playful, as though we had simply been apart for a weekend. I searched desperately for words. None came. Finally, I'm sorry. 2 words. Completely inadequate. Completely true. She looked at me for a long moment. I know. You know. I knew before you did. Quiet laugh escaped her. You've never been very good at saying what you feel. I almost smiled. She wasn't wrong. I read everything. I hoped you would. I should have asked questions. Yes. I should have listened. Yes. I should have stayed. For the first time, tears filled her eyes. Yes. Silence settled between us again. Not uncomfortable. Not cold. Just honest. She stepped aside. Come in. The room was small. A sofa. A fireplace. Books stacked beside the window. Fresh flowers resting on the table. Everything reflected Hannah. Warm. Calm. Alive. She poured tea into 2 simple mugs. No coffee. She smiled. The doctor says I should drink less. Doctor. The word no longer carried the same terror. Daniel told me the treatment is working. It is. You never told me. She wrapped both hands around her mug. I wanted you to choose me. Not my illness. I looked down. I chose my pride instead. She didn't argue. Because she didn't need to. It was true. Minutes passed as snow drifted gently outside. Finally, I reached into my coat pocket. The folded divorce decree remained there. I placed it carefully on the table. I carried this all the way here. She looked at it quietly. Why? So I could tell you something. I met her eyes. I signed this because I thought losing you would make life simpler. I slowly pushed the document aside. I was wrong. My voice cracked for the first time in years. I've spent 30 days learning that success means nothing when there's no one waiting to ask whether you've eaten dinner. A tear rolled down Hannah's cheek. I reached toward her, then stopped halfway, still afraid, still unsure I had earned the right, and said, she closed the distance herself. Her fingers gently wrapped around mine. Warm, real, alive. She smiled through her tears. Nathan, I can't promise tomorrow. I know. I can't promise everything will be easy. I know. She squeezed my hand a little tighter. But if you're truly here, don't leave just because life becomes difficult again. I held her hand as though it were the most valuable thing I had ever touched. Because now, I finally understood that it was. Outside, the snow continued, falling over the quiet mountains. For the first time in a very long time, neither of us felt the need to run from tomorrow. Love isn't proven by the promises we make on perfect days. It's proven by the ordinary choices we make after everything falls apart. I stayed in Colorado. Not for a weekend. Not for an apology. For as long as Hannah would let me. The first morning felt strangely unfamiliar.
No assistance.
No security briefings. No endless phone calls demanding my attention. Instead, I woke to the smell of fresh bread drifting through the open window. Hannah stood in the tiny kitchen, wearing an oversized gray sweater and humming softly as she sliced strawberries. She glanced over her shoulder. "You actually slept." "I guess I did. You used to sleep 4 hours. I used to think that was enough." She smiled. It never was. Breakfast fit on one small wooden table. Toast. Fruit.
There.
Nothing expensive. Nothing impressive. Somehow, it became the best meal I had eaten in years. Afterward, Hannah reached for her coat. "I have treatment this morning. I'll drive." "You don't have to." "I know." She looked at me for a long moment before handing me the car keys. The drive to the clinic was quiet. Not because we had nothing to say. Because silence no longer frightened us. Inside the treatment center, people greeted Hannah by name. Nurses smiled. Volunteers waved. Children in the waiting room ran toward her with drawings clutched in their hands. "Hannah, you came back." She knelt beside them without hesitation. I promised I would. One little boy proudly held up a picture covered in blue crayon. "I drew mountains. They're beautiful. And that's you." He pointed to a smiling stick figure. "You forgot your cape." She laughed. "I don't think I need one." Standing a few feet away, I realized something that hurt more than any regret. Everyone here knew who Hannah truly was. Everyone, except the man who had been married to her. An elderly volunteer approached me. "You must be Nathan." I smiled weakly. "Am I that obvious?" "Hannah talks about you." I looked toward her across the room. "Even after everything?" The woman nodded. "Especially after everything." Her answer left me speechless. Hours later, treatment ended. Hannah looked exhausted, but she still insisted on stopping at a small grocery store. "We need vegetables." "You should be resting." "I also need tomatoes." I followed her through narrow aisles. People greeted her. The cashier asked about her health. An elderly neighbor hugged her before leaving. She had quietly built an entire life here. One rooted in kindness instead of power. That evening, my phone rang for the first time in 2 days. "Marco, the board is demanding your return." I expected that. "They're threatening to vote on emergency leadership." I looked across the cabin. Hannah was asleep on the sofa, a book resting against her chest. 4 years, I would have boarded the next plane without hesitation. Not anymore. Tell them they'll have to wait. They won't like that. I know. You've never chosen anything over the business. I know. Marco remained silent. Finally, he laughed. I was beginning to wonder if the old Nathan Brooks would ever disappear. He already did. After hanging up, I gently placed a blanket over Hannah. She stirred slightly. "You should have answered." "I did. You should probably go back."
I sat beside her.
I spent years believing the empire needed me every hour. It doesn't. It survived before me. She reached for my hand. "And you." I looked around the quiet cabin. The books. The flowers. The fire crackling softly. The woman who had every reason to stop believing in me. I think. I smiled for the first time without forcing it. "I'm finally where I was supposed to be." Her fingers tightened around mine. "I don't need the old Nathan. You won't get him." Outside, the snow had begun melting beneath the first warmth of early spring. Inside, something even older was beginning to thaw. Not because forgiveness happened in a single conversation, but because every ordinary day afterward became another quiet promise kept. And for the first time in my life, I discovered that becoming worthy of someone's love wasn't one grand heroic act. It was choosing them. Every single morning. The greatest victories are rarely announced to the world. Most of them happen quietly, inside a heart that finally learns how to stay. Spring arrived almost without warning. The snow melted from the mountains. Wildflowers appeared beside the narrow roads leading to town. And for the first time in months, Hannah's doctor smiled before saying a single word. The latest scans look encouraging. Hannah squeezed my hand beneath the desk. I didn't realize I had been holding my breath until then. The doctor continued, "We're not calling this the finish line. I understand. But we're moving in the direction we hoped for." Hope. Such a small word. Yet it carried more power than every fortune I had ever built. As we walked outside, sunlight warmed the sidewalks. Hannah tilted her face toward the sky. "I miss this. The sunshine." She smiled. "The feeling that it's okay to plan next month." I looked at her. "What do you want to plan?" She laughed softly. "I thought you'd ask about business." "I'm learning." "So?" She pretended to think. "I want to plant a garden." "A garden?" "Yes." "That's your big dream?" She nodded confidently. "Tomatoes." Again with the tomatoes. "And roses." "I can handle roses." "And lavender." I laughed. "I think I can afford lavender." She gently bumped my shoulder. "You still think everything important has a price." "I'm trying not to." That weekend we planted flowers behind the cabin. Neither of us knew much about gardening. I dug holes too deep. She planted several seedlings upside down before noticing. We laughed until we could barely breathe. At one point, dirt covered both of our hands. Hannah looked at me and smiled. "I've never seen you this messy. I've never been this happy." She stopped moving. Not because she doubted me, because she believed me. Later that afternoon, Marco arrived unexpectedly. He stepped out of the SUV wearing the same perfectly tailored suit he always wore. Then he looked around at the tiny cabin, the muddy boots by the door, the garden tools scattered across the yard. Finally, he looked at me. "I almost didn't recognize you." "I barely recognized myself." He handed me a folder. "The board voted yesterday." I opened it slowly. "They accepted my resignation?" Marco nodded. "They also voted to make you chairman emeritus." I looked up. "I didn't ask for that. They said the company exists because you built it." I closed the folder. "They'll do better without me running every hour." Marco smiled knowingly. "I think you finally believe that." Before leaving, he walked toward Hannah. She hugged him warmly. "Take care of him." Marco laughed. "I've been trying for years." She looked at me. "I think he's finally letting someone." After he drove away, we sat together on the old wooden porch. The mountains glowed orange beneath the setting sun. I rested my head against the wall. "You know something?" "What?" "I spent half my life trying to own everything." She listened quietly. "Houses, companies, influence, control." I looked toward the small garden we had planted together. And somehow, the only thing that ever truly mattered was the one person I thought would always be waiting. Hannah slipped her hand into mine. "I wasn't waiting." I looked at her confused. She smiled gently. "I was hoping." There was a difference. Waiting expected. Hope believed. One came from certainty. The other came from love. As evening settled over the valley, neighbors gathered for a small community picnic. Children chased each other through the grass. Someone played an old acoustic guitar. No one cared who I had once been. No one whispered about wealth, or power, or the Brooks family. To them, I was simply Nathan, the man carrying folding chairs beside the woman he loved. As darkness slowly covered the mountains, Hannah rested her head on my shoulder. "Do you ever miss your old life?" I thought carefully before answering. "I miss who I believed I had to be." "And now?" I kissed the top of her head. "Now I'd rather protect one peaceful evening with you than conquer another city without you." Above us, the first stars appeared one by one. Quiet, steady, unhurried. Much like the life we were finally learning to build together. Not through dramatic promises, but through countless ordinary moments that neither of us would ever take for granted again. People think love changes your future. They're wrong. Real love changes the person who walks into that future. 5 years later, the garden had become impossible to control, exactly the way Hannah liked it. Lavender spilled over the stone path. White roses climbed the old wooden fence. Tomatoes grew in every corner despite my repeated attempts to organize them into neat rows. They're happier this way, Hannah always said. She was usually right. Our cabin no longer felt small. It felt complete. The walls carried photographs instead of expensive artwork. Pictures from ordinary afternoons, community picnics, mountain trails, harvest festivals, birthdays shared with neighbors who had quietly become family. There wasn't a single photograph from my old penthouse. Not because I hated my past, because I no longer needed proof that I had escaped it. One crisp autumn morning, I stood on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. Hannah stepped outside wearing the same peaceful smile that had first welcomed me to room 214. She accepted her cup. You remembered. I finally stopped forgetting. She laughed softly. I noticed. The scars from her treatments had faded. Her strength had returned little by little. Every follow-up appointment brought another encouraging report. The illness had changed our lives, but it no longer controlled them. Some mornings we talked for hours. Other mornings we simply watched the sunrise together. Neither felt incomplete. A black SUV slowly pulled into the driveway. Marco climbed out carrying a familiar leather folder. He looked around the property and smiled. The tomatoes won again. They always do. He handed me the folder. The annual reports. I didn't open them. You already know my answer. Ido. He nodded toward Hannah. The foundation opened its 5th community center last month. She smiled modestly. We had a lot of help. Not entirely true. After leaving New York, we had quietly transformed a portion of my fortune into something neither of us had imagined years earlier. Scholarships, health programs, family counseling, community gardens. Small projects that gave people what money alone never could. A chance. Marco looked at me. The board still wants your name on the headquarters. I shook my head. They should name it after someone who stayed. You built it. I looked toward Hannah. She rebuilt me. Marco didn't argue. He simply smiled before driving away. That afternoon, children from the neighborhood arrived carrying baskets of apples. Mrs. Mitchell. We picked too many. Hannah laughed. I don't think that's possible. One little girl turned toward me. Mr. Nathan. Yes. My mom says you used to be very important. Hannah tried not to laugh. I knelt beside the little girl. What do you think? She studied me carefully. I think you're good at fixing fences. I smiled. That's probably more useful. She nodded confidently. I think so too. After they left, Hannah slipped her hand into mine. You don't miss being feared? I looked across the quiet valley, the mountains, the garden, the laughter still echoing from the children. No. What do you miss? I thought for a long moment. Only the years I wasted believing success could replace presence. She rested her head against my shoulder. We can't change those years. I know. But we changed the years after them. As evening settled over the mountains, we walked slowly through the garden. The lavender carried its familiar fragrance. The roses swayed gently in the wind. Near the gate stood a small wooden sign Hannah had painted herself years ago. It read, "Grow what you hope to keep." I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. I used to think love meant protecting someone from pain. She looked up at me. And now, I think love means staying beside them, even when you can't remove the pain. She smiled. I like that better. The last light of sunset disappeared behind the mountains. We stood there together in comfortable silence. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because every important word had already been proven through the life we had built. I once ruled a city. People obeyed my voice. They feared my decisions. They remembered my name. None of that became my legacy. My legacy was a small garden in the mountains. A woman who never stopped believing there was still goodness beneath my pride. And the quiet truth she taught me too late to change yesterday. But just in time to transform every tomorrow that followed. Because in the end, the greatest man in the room is never the one with the most power. It's the one who finally learns that the strongest thing a heart can do is stay.